Violence against women and girls is pernicious, and that's why I worked so hard on it when I was Director of Public Prosecutions and made it my personal mission to tackle violence against women and girls, and a Labour Party mission of zero tolerance. This morning I've been talking to survivors in a refuge, and that's only reinforced, and I hear their experiences reinforce that personal mission for me. I have to say, I'm pretty shocked that 97% of sexual offences aren't even charged, and I feel that under this government we're going backwards, and when we get a Labour government we will increase the sentences in these sorts of cases, we will speed up the court process, and we'll have a domestic violence register, because we have to be clear, zero tolerance is the only way forward when it comes to violence against women and girls.
And if we could just move on to some more national topics, do you support the nurses' strike?
Well, the nurses have been driven to this by the government, and that's a badge of shame for the government. They've never taken strike action before, and for patients this is going to be devastating news. Nurses don't want to go on strike, and now it seems the Health Secretary is not even prepared to get around the table to continue negotiations to avoid the strike. And frankly, if the government is that tired of governing, then they should get out of the way and allow a different government to come in and deal with the underlying questions like the lack of staffing. We want to train up 15,000 new staff to come in. Cavalry is coming under a Labour government. We wouldn't sit on our hands as this government is doing.
It's about working conditions. It's mainly about pay, though, Mr Starmer. Would you support their pay demands?
Well, look, it is about pay, but it is also about staffing, because talk to anybody in the NHS, my wife works in the NHS, and they will tell you they're under so much strain when it comes to staffing. And that's why our plan to use money by getting rid of the non-dom status and using that to train up 15,000 new doctors is a very important part of the discussions, because the NHS needs to know the cavalry are coming. But so far as the pay is concerned, what we would do is get round the table and resolve the issue. You would never have a Labour Party Health Secretary saying, I'm not going to get round the table and continue discussions. And the proof is there. When Labour were in power, we didn't have strikes of nurses, and actually we had fair pay for nurses. So the difference between what Labour would do and what this government is doing could not be starker.
But if the money's not there to pay a pay rise, the money's not there, is it?
Well, look, you can't sit this one out, which is what the government seems to be doing. They've got a responsibility. They're abdicating that responsibility, and to have driven the nurses to this situation for the first time in their history, and then to say we're not prepared now even to get around the table to try and ensure that these strikes don't go ahead, is just further evidence that they're out of ideas, they're tired, and really, if they don't want to carry on governing, they should get out of the way.
With the sort of NHS backlog, is there a sort of moral question to this particular strike that maybe isn't there with rail workers? Should these people really be going on strike with this enormous backlog that needs to be brought down?
Well, I think whether it's nurses, whether it's rail workers, whether it's Royal Mail workers, they are all struggling with a cost of living crisis made in Downing Street. We've got prices going through the roof. We've got an energy crisis where the government isn't doing enough to help working people, and that's putting people in a really difficult position. What I want to see from a government is getting a government that gets to grip with the cost of living crisis. They've made a bad situation worse. It's not just the 12 weeks that we've had, but it's the 12 years of failure that we've had, and they're not resolving the underlying issues. And so whether it's nurses, rail workers, or those working in the Royal Mail or elsewhere, it's the cost of living crisis that is driving this. And the government can't just sit it out and say it's none of our responsibility.
Just to change topics to planning, this week you committed your party to help pass the Levelling Up and Planning Bill.
Yes.
What's your message to the MPs who want to restrict the planning system further and make it harder to build?
Well, what we've seen, particularly in the last few days, is division and argument in the Conservative Party about planning, and that's whether it's onshore wind farms, which are vital for our energy security and bringing our prices down, or whether it's homes, which are vital. So that quarrelling, those arguments, they're not just internal Conservative Party issues. They have an impact. It means we won't get cheaper, secure energy as quickly as we should, and they are killing off the dream of home ownership, because they can't agree amongst themselves. They're a tired party, they're a divided party, and they are not really any longer able to show that they can govern the country.
Okay.